Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to another edition of Movie Goodness, where we examine life through cinema here on the KB Radio Network. How are we doing, everybody? It is Easter weekend, and in true movie goodness fashion, we're going off topic. We're not even going to discuss Easter. We're not going to talk about Easter today. We're going to talk about something that is current. There's a new movie out that just came out this past Wednesday, April the 5th, and it was entitled The Super Mario Brothers Movie. And it is highly anticipated for me, being as though I am a child of the 80s and 90s. So I was really into video games. My brother, he had the Atari. And I remember the I remember that game console because I ruined it. I forgot what I poured into where the game cartridge go. I was about 5 or 6 years old. I forgot how old I was at the time, but I didn't know. I was just experimenting. I wanted to see what would happen. So I poured the stuff in there and ruined the Atari. He wanted to kill me. I finally remember that, and probably still wants to kill me to to this day. But I remember doing that, and but prior to that, yeah, it was Pac-Man. What was it? Was it Asteroid? Another game that he had. I didn't have too many games, but we fast forward. I got a little older, and then the Nintendo came out. And oh man, you talk about begging and pleading for a Nintendo from my parents, and it was like pulling teeth. It was a struggle. I finally got the Nintendo for Christmas one year, and I got the one. It came with Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt, and then I think there was another game with it. Can't remember which game it was, but I had the power pad, the pad that you lay down and you press on it. Matter of fact, still have that thing. It's still in my mom's house. I saw it not too long ago. Rolled up in the attic. I was like, man, still got that power pad. And I never played it. And the reason I never played the power pad is because my room was upstairs. And my room sat right over my mom's room. And she wasn't having it. I wasn't going to be jumping around on that pad playing the game while she's in her room laying down. Not going to happen. So I never played the game. Now, I know what you're saying. Well, why didn't you just bring it downstairs and play it on the big TV? No. No. During the day, Mom watching her stories. So I couldn't use the TV then. When Pop got home, it's Westerns. So that's it. There was no touching that TV. So I had to play it in my room. Regardless. Yeah, Super Mario Brothers. That was my game. And this is the time when playing a video game, you had to be skilled. You had to be very cunning in your video game play. Being as though you only had 3 lives. So you play Super Mario Brothers, you get all the way to the end, you're on your last life and you die. That would cause trauma, and it's trauma for me because I'm still dealing with it. And now you play video games, you have endless lives. There's no no skill to it. You can sacrifice yourself just to figure out how to get through a level. So I went through the Nintendo, graduated from that. I got the Super Nintendo. And then I got the Nintendo 64. Or which one came first? Was it the 64 or the Super? I don't remember. I know I had them both. And from there, I had the Sega Genesis and got the PlayStation 1, then the 2, then the 3, then the 4, which I currently have. Don't have the 5 yet. Actually, I don't know if I'm going to get the 5. It's hard to get the 5s. Plus, my bank account won't allow me to. So I'm good with the 4. And so I'm just going to count my blessings with that. And speaking of counting blessings, you know, throughout my adulthood, even throughout my childhood, I used to say that we were poor. You know, that I grew up poor, parents were struggling, which they did. They struggled. But as you can see, as you heard, I got every game console there was. You know, and it didn't dawn on me until I got older, where I was like, wow, you know, my parents really did spoil me. I was spoiled. I got all the games, and despite the fact that they were struggling, they still found a way to give me those games. And you know, it's sad that I had to wait till I got older to realize that. But hey, it is what it is. It's better late than never, I would say. But video games were a big part of my life, and not to mention not just the home consoles, but going to the mall and going to the arcade and playing Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, and you know all those type of games at the arcade. It was just a good time, man. It was a good time to be alive. Um, and I loved video games. I mean, I'm not the only one. Who didn't around that time? It was a revolutionary thing. And when the Nintendos and the Xboxes, and oh yeah, I did have an Xbox too. Well, actually, I didn't. I bought my girls an Xbox for Christmas, and when they went off to college, I took it. So I got the Xbox too, but I ended up giving it back to my daughter because she wanted it at college. But whatever. Anywho's, yeah, all those is so you can have the arcade at home. You know, you can play the games at home. And then we get to the 90s, more prevalent, 1993, 30 years ago. And as I say that, I've never felt so old in my life reciting that. 30 years in 1993, when Hollywood looked at video games and said, you know what? We can make movies based on these video games. You know, all these kids are going crazy about these games. Let's start making some film adaptations of these games. Well, it sounds good, and as of late, it's just now starting to pay off. You're actually starting to get some good adaptations. The stigma on video game movies is that they're bad, man. They suck, all of them. Out of all the video game movies, you could probably count on one hand how many of them were good. I counted 44. Now, these are just 44 that we're going to go over today. But there are 44 video game live action movies. And these are just live action. I'm not counting, for instance, the Super Mario Brothers movie that just got released as an animated film. And the countless animated Street Fighter movies and, you know, things of that nature. We're doing live action adaptations. And 44. And you probably can, maybe 5. Maybe 5 were worth its weight in gold. I compare it to superhero movies or comic book movies. You know, back in the day, comic book movies, those movies were horrible, man. I.e., Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, Batman and Robin, you know, Fantastic Four, pick one, Captain America from 1990, so on and so forth. Just around that era, horrible comic book movies. The Punisher with Dolph Lundgren, I think that was in the 80s. They just made some horrible comic book movies. So now it's the bee's knees. It's the biggest genre in film right now. It might be experiencing some superhero fatigue as of late, but I don't think it's fatigue. I think it's quality. It's starting to dip a little bit, but not to those levels, not to Quest for Peace levels, but it's just starting to dip from the high that we got in 2019 with when it reached its peak with Avengers Endgame. But yeah, it took a while. It took a while. And I think that's what's happening with video game adaptations as well. Even though it's taking a little longer, I think it's hard for me to wrap my head around why Hollywood and these producers and directors and writers can't come up with a story that is canon. And I mean, you have a blueprint right there. Why change? And I know you need to change some things, just like comic book movies. They change some things to translate to film. I understand. You know, same thing with this. If you need to change some things to translate it to film, I understand. But as we've seen in the past, in recent history rather, with The Last of Us on HBO, you don't need to change nothing. You know, the changes that they made was actually just icing on the cake. They basically did shot for shot, almost word for word reenactment of the game, you know, but it was more. They just added a little more to it, you know, put a little hot sauce on it. But they followed the game. Why they can't follow these games? You know, I know some of these games are super outlandish and you can't follow it verbatim. You know, like for example, like a Mortal Kombat. Sometimes you need to give it its own backstory. Like the recent Mortal Kombat, which I enjoyed. I didn't think it was the greatest, but I had fun with it. But they did too much, you know. They added characters. Why do you feel the need to add a new character for a movie? And Mortal Kombat has a plethora of characters you can pull from. It just makes no sense. That didn't make any sense to me. But whatever. On today's episode, we're going to go through all of the live action video game adaptations. I'm not going to review and rank each and every one, being as though I did unfortunately see the vast majority of these movies. I suffered through them. But I'll just say yay or nay for these movies. And at the end, we're going to review, which I would say is the very first, well, I'm not going to say this is the very first live action video game adaptation. Just so happened to be the 30-year anniversary of the release of this classic. And it is none other, appropriately, Super Mario Brothers from 1993. And yeah, that's going to be a fun one. But anywho's, that's where it started. I'll save that for the review. But the very next year, we got another video game adaptation to a game that I enjoyed playing when I was a little youngster. And in 1994, we got the adaptation of Double Dragon, which was horrible. We had Mark Dacascos, who I like Mark Dacascos from Only the Strong. He was recently in John Wick 3. Real skilled martial artist, real good actor as well. He also played Eric Drake, the Crow, in that Crow TV show that came out, I don't know, maybe that was about 30 years ago, but he was in this film. Scott Wolf, who knows zero martial arts, he played his brother. You had Alyssa Milano in here, Robert Patrick, Julia Nichols. This movie was so bad. I remember watching this and I was like, what is this, man? This is nothing like the game. Nothing like the game. And it was so boring. It barely had any action. It was dumb. It made no sense. But I wasn't tripping. I wasn't mad because a month later we got another movie that was coming out. And you want to talk about excited. I was so excited for this movie that came out Christmas 1994. And it was none other than Street Fighter. And Street Fighter was my favorite game at the time, along with many other people. And Street Fighter was the game, man. I remember going to the mall and playing that game, and it was a line. You know, you had to wait your turn. You know, it was like a little mini tournament, playing Street Fighter against whoever. You know, Ryu, not Raul. Who was my favorite? I think it was Ken. I think Ken was my favorite. Never really, because he looked like Bruce Lee on the game, and so I always used Ken. But I wasn't super great at it. But regardless, but the movie, I was excited for the movie because the movie starred Jean-Claude Van Damme, and he was going to play Gao, and I was like, yeah, fire, you know. And then you had Raul Julia, who God rest his soul, he died not too long after this film. I think he passed away during the making or right before its release. I'm not 100% sure, but I know it was close around the release of this. This was definitely his last film, and you could tell he was really sick during the making of it, and you could see it on his face in the movie. But he made that movie for his children. He said he wanted to leave something for his kids to watch, you know, which I thought was pretty cool. Unfortunately, I love and miss Raul Julia, but this isn't a legacy you wanted to leave behind. This was a horrible movie too. So disappointing. It you had all the characters. I mean, they nailed the characters. You had all of them. You had Gao. You had Shang Li, Ken. You had Raul. You had Charles. You had Thunderhawk. Like I said, Raul Julia. He was Bison. You had DJ Vega, Sagat. Oh man, you had all the characters in this movie, and you still managed to mess it up. It was so cheesy and bad. It just bad. Now we later learned down the line that Jean-Claude Van Damme, and this is his own words, so I'm not spreading rumors about the man. He said during the making of that film, he was high as a kite. He was he was on cocaine heavy throughout the making of this film, and I could tell. Actually, it looked like everybody was high on coke. This movie was so bad and so disappointing, but there's a redemption story to be told. All was not lost, because in 1995, there was a film that came out that saved live action video game adaptations. This was the very first good video game adaptation, and at the time it was great. I went to see this movie 5 times in the theater. 5 times. I went to go see this movie, and it is none other than Mortal Kombat. This movie in 1995 just, I don't know, just blew my mind. Just like Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat was like, it's similar to Street Fighter. I'm talking about the game here, but it was violent. You know, it was brutal, bloody. Everything that Street Fighter wasn't, Mortal Kombat was. And so couldn't wait for the movie. When they announced the movie, I remember seeing that poster for the first time with the symbol, and I was like, oh my God, they making that movie? And that, mind you, this is after I've seen Street Fighter, and I thought all hope was lost. Man, Mortal Kombat blew my mind. Now, with that being said, yes, I went to the theater and saw it 5 times. I felt it should have been nominated for Best Picture in 1995. Now, I'm an older person, wiser person. I watched the 1995 film recently, and it's it is cheap. It is some of the worst acting you will see in the movie, but it is still a guilty pleasure for me. It's still fun. It knows what it is, and it just goes in. You know what I'm saying? It's not trying to be more than what it is. It is what it is. And I enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. And so did many others. It was the first video game adaptation to gross over $100 million at the box office. It was a juggernaut in 1995. So much so that in 1997, we got a sequel, Mortal Kombat Annihilation. I'm not going to link it to video game movies because I was going to call it the worst video game adaptation ever. This is one of the worst movies ever. This movie was so bad. I mean, now I was 18 when this movie came out, and this was like the first time that I debated walking out of a theater in the middle of a movie. Now I have done it in the past. I have walked out of movies before because they were that bad, but this one was the first time that I actually considered walking out the movie and not asking for my money. I didn't care. I just wanted to get out of there. This movie was that bad. It was that bad. It is not because it's Mortal Kombat. It was just a bad movie. Everything about it was trash. The acting, which gave a pass for their first one, but I couldn't do it in this one because it was worse. You would think they would get better. You know, they would know the character more. They played the character so they could play, you know, add a little more to this character. No, they regressed. Got worse. They changed Raiden. It was a new Raiden who knew less martial arts than the first Raiden. The CGI, worst CGI ever. The Dutch angles. It was a horrible movie going experience. I've only seen this movie twice. I seen it when I went to go see it in 1997, and I tried it again a few years ago when they remade Mortal Kombat, and I figured, okay, I'm gonna do a rewatch of all the Mortal Kombat movies, and it was a chore. It took me a few hours to get through. I had to stop it. I had to stop so many times to get through it. It was horrible. But all right, we moving on. In 1999, we got the film adaptation of Wing Commander. I remember playing that with my friend. Friend around the corner. He played it on his PC, and I thought it was an interesting game. Nothing that I would say, okay, make a movie out of, you know. But they made a movie out of it, and honestly, I do remember watching it, but I don't remember watching it, if that makes any sense. The movie starred Freddie Prinze Jr., who was, you know, the hot thing around that time, and he couldn't help it. It was just it was bad. I do remember it being bad and boring. I do remember that much about it, but it is what it is. 2 years later, we got a film that I would say I enjoyed. You know what I'm saying? I enjoyed this movie. Then, now not so much. Now it is pure cheese. It is a cheesy movie, and honestly, not that good. But I did enjoy it at the time, and it did star one of my favorite actresses, Angelina Jolie. She was fresh off a Academy Award winning performance in Girl Interrupted, and she decided to do a video game movie. Who knew? And it was Lara Croft Tomb Raider. And Tomb Raider is a game that I didn't play. I didn't start playing Tomb Raider till I think it came on the PS2 or 3 when they revamped it, and that's when I started playing it because it was more like a Uncharted type game. after that, after they switched. Of course, the other ones could have been too, but I didn't play those earlier versions. I love that version of Tomb Raider. I like this movie, even though I wasn't too familiar with the game, but I did like it. Now you go back and watch it, pure cheese. It's pure cheese, ham is I don't know what. The film did gross $274 million worldwide. One of the biggest comic book video game movies to ever be released. And hey, man, it is what it is. It did prompt a sequel that came a little later, but before we got that sequel, in 2002, we got Resident Evil. Resident Evil, I enjoyed. I did like Resident Evil. I wasn't a big Resident Evil video game fan, but I know of it. I did play it, but I wasn't like over the moon excited. I was just okay. I like horror movies and I like video games. Put them together, we're gonna get Resident Evil. All right, it's a win-win. And I went to the theater, went to watch it. I enjoyed it. I did. I enjoyed that first Resident Evil, the first one. I need y'all to keep that in mind. And have fun. You have Mila Jovovich starring in it. Michelle Rodriguez also was in here, and many others. It was directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, who directed that first Mortal Kombat film. So I was like, okay, well, God knows video game adaptations. I enjoyed Mortal Kombat, and let's just check this out. It was good. I did enjoy Resident Evil, the first one. And so now we move on to 2003, and this is when we get the sequel to Lara Croft, Tomb Raider, The Cradle of Life. Horrible. That's all I can basically say about it. Horrible. It was so bad. I remember the promotion around this movie. It was so bad that the commercials for this movie, they're like, oh, go see Lara Croft Tomb Raider, The Cradle of Life, and you could see people really fly. They had those wingsuits, and they were really fly, and that was the promotion. It was nothing else. I'll never forget. I don't know why it's seared in my brain, but it is. That was the promotion. That's the only reason to go see it, because there is no other reason to go see that movie. Horrible. Later that year, in 2003, we got another horror video game adaptation, and it was House of the Dead. I have nothing to say to that. Another horrible. Well, this movie was made by Yuri Boll, and if anybody knows who Yuri Boll is, all he does is make horrible movies. And you're gonna hear his name pop up a lot because he does a lot of video game adaptations, and I don't know how he does it, don't know why he does it. That's more important, but he does. And they're horrible movies. Anyways, yeah, House of the Dead, just horrible. Anyways, 2004, we get the sequel to Resident Evil, Resident Evil Apocalypse. This is where it started to go downhill for me with Resident Evil. I felt this was a decent one, but this was the last good Resident Evil film, in my humble opinion. It was all right. It was all right. I can say this is the last time where it kind of stuck with the game, with Nemesis and the Umbrella Corporation, which played the Umbrella Corporation plays a part throughout all the games, but the way it is in the game, after this, they kind of went on a different path. But this is the last one where it felt like the video game. And that's why I felt, okay, this is a decent one. So, yeah, we get that. And then the next year, in 2005, we get another Yuri Boll film, Alone in the Dark. The less said about that, the better. To be honest with you, I only saw a quarter of this movie. I could not watch it. I think Christian Slater stars in it. It was so bad, so bad. Maybe it redeemed itself later on, but I doubt it. The way that movie started off, it was no saving it. Uh, yeah, it was bad. It's bad. Okay, later that year in 2005, we got a film that I was kind of surprised with, and it was Doom. And Doom was a game I was first introduced. Oh man, I had the year in my head. A friend of mine, once again, he had the PC game, and he showed me how to play it, and I thought it was fun. It was a first-person shooter, the first-person shooter that I ever played, and it was exciting. I was like, man, this is cool. Going around corners and all this here, you don't know what's popping up on the other side, and blah blah blah. It was fun, and they made the movie. Now the movie, how can I put this? What drew me to this movie was The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. He stars in it, and I was interested to see him in a movie like this, and come to find out that he was the villain, and it, but he don't become the villain until later on. But yeah, man, I was like, okay, I'll go see that. And I went to go see it. I enjoyed it for the most part. Even had a nice little Easter egg in there for a part of the movie. The character, I think Carl Urban was the protagonist in this film. He does the scene. It was the first person shooter, like, the way they shot it, just like the video game. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. I thought that was a nice little touch to it. But overall, it was not a great movie. It was, it was all right at best. But it was good to see The Rock as a villain. I think that was the first time, probably the only time, he's been a villain in a movie. So you have that going for it. But yeah, that came out in 2005. In 2006, we get another another classic from Yuri Bowl, and it is Blood Rain. And this one is a vampire game. I never played the game. I don't know much about it. But to be honest with you, I didn't watch the movie. This is one of the ones I didn't watch. Once I saw Yuri Bowl, fool me once, shame on, you know the saying. I don't forget how it go. But I was not going to go a third time with Yuri Bowl. And apparently nobody else did either, because the movie only grossed $3 million worldwide. So it's not worth discussing anyway. It is what it is. So later that year in 2006, we got another horror. This was a period where we've got nothing but horror video games adaptation, which is weird. But Hollywood, they go on these little streaks, copy every other studio what they're doing, and this is basically what they did for about a year and a half. And 2006, we got Silent Hill. Now, I never played the Silent Hill video game, but I'm a horror fan, so of course I was interested, and I liked it. And the reason I liked it because I never played the game. I don't know how players of the games or fans of the games felt about it, but it did pretty good at the box office. It didn't set any records or anything, but it made its money. But I did enjoy it. I thought it was a really good movie as far as horror wise. I thought some of the visuals in it was awesome. But yeah, that's a game I never played. But you would have to ask somebody who played the game, rather it was up to snuff as far as adaptation. Later that year, we got a movie that I did not go to the theater to see because I refused to pay money to go see this because I knew it was going to be bad. It just smelt bad from the word go. And it was DOA, Dead or Alive. And I remember this game at the arcade. And it was like a volleyball game. The girls playing volleyball, and they had some fighting, but it was, I vaguely remembered it. I didn't play it much. So they made the game. I mean, they made the movie based on the game. And sure enough, I saw it. I think somebody I knew had a bootleg. You know, Statutes of Limitation. I think I'm good. Somebody I knew had a bootleg, and I watched it, and I was like, "Thank God, I did not go to the theaters to see this movie. Thank you, Jesus." Another horrible, horrible movie, and that has nothing to do with it being a video game adaptation. It's just a bad movie. Straight up, man. Um, and you know, randomly, just crazy. It's crazy because I watched that movie when I was on vacation for Christmas. Uh, and we was in the condo and didn't have many channels to watch TV on, and this movie was on one of the channels. And I ended up watching it, and I was like, Jesus, this is horrible. Man, I'm going outside in the snow. It was in the freezing cold. I went and played in the snow for a little while. Yeah, it was that bad. Moving on to 2007, we get yet another Resident Evil sequel, and it is Resident Evil Extinction. Like I said, after Apocalypse, I really checked out with Resident Evil, and this was another one. I don't even recall going to the movies to go see this one. It just looked bad. I wasn't looking forward to it. It just looked bad. I seen it on cable maybe a few months after this, and I was right. It wasn't. It was not all that good. They kept making those Resident Evil films because they were making over $100 million every time. The first one made 102 million. The second one made 129 million. This one here made 148 million. It just kept making money, so they kept making movies, and we were suffering for it, man. we was suffering for it, but it is what it is. It just wasn't. It wasn't that good. It wasn't that good, and it only got worse as it went on. Later on that year, actually a couple of months after this, you guessed it, Yuri Bold made another comic video game adaptation, and it was Postal. I don't know what Postal is, but I do remember them saying it's another video game adaptation. Never heard of it. The movie, I never watched it. Apparently nobody else did either, because this movie grossed a whopping, and this worldwide totals, people, $146,000 worldwide. Wow. Just wow. Nobody saw this movie. I don't even know where you could find that. But anywho's, like I said, never watched it. Can't really say nothing about it. A month later, we got a film that I was excited for because I love the video game, Hitman. Hitman is a video game series that I don't know, man. If they do it right, it can be amazing. This one, Timothy Olyphant, he played Hitman. Hitman 47 or Agent 47, and I like Timothy Olyphant, and he wasn't bad in the role. I just didn't think he fit the role. He just didn't fit the mold for me as Hitman. Like I said, the movie's fine. It was all right, but it was just early 2000s movie. It was an early 2000s movie. That's the best way I can describe it. All right. In 2008, we got yet another Yuri Bold film, and this one was kind of a shock to me because it starred Jason Statham, and around this time, this is when Jason Statham was heating up. You know, you had the Transporter films. You know, he was in that movie with Jet Li. You know, so he was heating up. He was a hot item, and he starred in this Yuri Bold film. You know, and it's based on a video game, and it's In the Name of the King, a Dragon Saga tale. I got halfway through this one and I turned it off. I've yet to go back and watch it again. I cannot watch this movie. I cannot watch Yuri Bowl movies. I just can't do it. It is brutal, man. And this was a brutal movie to watch. Jason Statham did not fit nothing I was watching. It made no sense. Couldn't follow the story, so I just left it alone. But you want to hear something crazy? This isn't the last movie Yuri Bowl made in 2008. And yes, another video game adaptation. Later that year, he made Far Cry. And I played Far Cry once. I think I rented it. And it was all right. But I wasn't a huge fan of it. But I never watched the movie. I just couldn't take it no more. I can't take Yuri Bowl. I can't take his movies. That year, in a rarity, we had 3 video game adaptations in 2008. None of them were good. None of them were good. The last movie we got in 2008 was Max Payne. Now, this one I was excited for. I was excited because it was Mark Wahlberg. You know, you had Bo Bridges, you had Ludacris. It seemed like it was going to be interesting. And Max Payne, the game, I own it. Still have that game. I love that game. Movie was horrible. The movie was horrible. I can't even front. I did not like that movie. I think I fell asleep in the theater. I had to finish watching it when it came on video. I had to rent it in order to finish watching it. It was that it bored me. It bored me to death. But yeah, man, very disappointing. Very disappointing game. Movie of the game. In 2009, we got Street Fighter. We got another Street Fighter film. They tried it again. This time they went in a different direction. They were going to base the film solely on one character, and that was Chun-Li. Street Fighter, The Legend of Chun-Li. Now, I'm not hating on that, but the actress they picked to play Chun-Li did not work for me. And I like her because it was, what's her name? Kristen Crew. She was on Smallville. And I like her. And she just didn't fit the role, and the movie was just bad. It just flat out bad. It was. I mean, you had Michael Clark Duncan in this movie. You had some stars in here. Did not work, man. Did not work at all. It was not a Street Fighter film. If it had been something else, had they just went a different way, because it had nothing to do with Street Fighter. Absolutely nothing to do with Street Fighter. Don't understand why they made this movie. All right. That was the only movie that came out in 2009 based on video game. In 2010, on my birthday nonetheless, we got Tekken. I didn't even know this movie existed. Be real with you. I found that out when I was doing research for this show. Did not know they made a Tekken movie. Hey, I gotta find it and I have to watch it. I'm curious, even though the movie only grossed $1 million and it holds a 0 rating on Rotten Tomatoes. So that lets you know all you need to know about Tekken. All right, and a couple of months after that, in 2010, we got a film that I was highly anticipating, mainly because of the star, Jake Gyllenhaal. Now, when you look back in hindsight, the casting was whitewashed, but you can look back on a million films like that and you're going to get that same result. Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time. I was excited for this because not because I played the game, because I never played Prince of Persia, but I was excited to see Jake Gyllenhaal in kind of an action movie. You know, he'd never been in action roles up to this point. And so it looked exciting. And the little bit that I knew about the Prince of Persia was the parkour that Prince Dassin does. So I was excited to see that. This is another film I fell asleep on in the theater. I'm gonna be honest, I fell asleep in the theater watching this movie. And I did eventually watch it, from beginning to end. It was all right. That's the best I can give it. It wasn't, it just didn't move the needle for me. But regardless, it is what it is, and they've never revisited that property. All right, we move on later that year in 2010. Yes, I know it's been a while since I said the name, so you knew it was coming eventually. Another Resident Evil Afterlife. I mean, what could I don't know what to say. If you've seen the other ones, you've seen this one. It's the same thing. And this was the highest grossing one out of them all. It grossed over $300 million. And so you knew another one was coming. And yes, another one came in 2012. Resident Evil Retribution. Once again, if you've seen the other ones, you've seen this one. It's the same thing. It's silly. All right. Also in 2012, we got the sequel to Silent Hill Revolution. And I've yet to see this movie. I keep forgetting they made this movie. Once again, didn't realize it until I was doing research for this show. And I said, you know what? Yeah, man, I forgot they made a sequel to that. But I wanted to go back and watch that, and I will eventually. Moving on to 2014, we get The Need for Speed. And this was, yes, a video game adaptation, but at the same time, this was supposed to parallel the Fast and the Furious films, supposed to launch a franchise. You had Aaron Paul starring in it, and from Breaking Bad. And I once again, I remember the promotion for this movie, and the promotion was there's no CGI. All the stunts are practical. All the the vehicle stunt work and stuff like that were practical. That's all fine and good, but I need a story. The story didn't work for me. It just was not good. All right, 2015, we get another crack at Hitman. This time, Hitman Agent 47, and I actually like the other one better. Well, to be fair, they both felt the same to me. They felt like the same movie. Nothing new, nothing to reinvent the wheel here. It was just like the first Hitman with Timothy Artifact. This time around, I can't remember who played him in this movie, but regardless, it just wasn't. It just didn't do it for me. In 2016, we had a film that was supposed to revolutionize the video game adaptation, and it was Warcraft. The excitement for this film, and everybody who played Warcraft or still plays Warcraft. I never played it, but I know it was a phenomenon back around the time this movie was released. I don't know how much of a phenomenon it is right now, but I do know it was a thing back then. And this movie adaptation was supposed to be the bee's knees. I don't know about the game, but the movie, man, I was really let down with that movie. It just did not work for me on so many levels. It was just bad. it was bad. It was all over the place. You know what I'm saying? And I just could not concentrate. I already have a focus problem, and that movie did not help. But hey, it could be worse. It could be Assassin's Creed, because later that year, that's what we got. The film adaptation of Assassin's Creed, a film that I was so excited for so many reasons. I've played 3 of the games. I forgot how many games there are, but I played those games and I love Assassin's Creed. I love Michael Fassbender and him being the the star of it. I'm like, oh man, I'm all in. Oh my God, they're gonna make an Assassin's Creed movie, because it deals with it's science fiction, going back in time and stuff like that, and these assassins, they hopping on roofs, doing parkour and all this other stuff. And I'm like, man, this in the story in the games are so deep. So I'm like, all right, man, and this is the perfect movie for Michael Fassbender. Man, this movie was trash. I mean, I cried at the end, and it wasn't for reasons. It wasn't crying at the end like I did for Endgame. No, this was crying at the end due to pain. The pain I was feeling watching this movie. It was horrible. This movie was horrible. And it was supposed to launch a franchise, and of course it didn't because of the reception from it. Man, I was so disappointed with Assassin's Creed. In 2017, we get yet another Resident Evil film, and this go around, it is the last one, at least of this quote unquote storyline, and it is Resident Evil: The Final Chapter. This was supposed to be the last one, and it is. It is. They haven't made another one. They did make one, but it's a different storyline. They made that a couple of years ago. But anyways, yeah, this was what it was. That's all I can say. In 2018, I was super excited for this because this Tomb Raider followed the Tomb Raiders that I played, the games that I played, the later generation games. Whereas, Angelina Jolie, it was more of the first generation Tomb Raider games. And this was supposed to be based off of the video game, Rise of the Tomb Raider, and, more of her origin story. This go around, you have Alicia Vikander. She plays Lara Croft in this game, and I'm in this movie. And it kind of fell a little flat. The movie was all right. It was all right, but I'll say this much: it was better than the Angelina Jolie films. It was better than those 2 films, but it not by much. Not by much. They were set up for sequels. It was supposed to be more, but as of right now, there's no movement on any sequels for Tomb Raider. I think I read somewhere recently that they're probably going to do a streaming series on one of those streaming services. We'll see. But yeah, it Tomb Raider. Later that year, actually a month later, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, decided to do another video game adaptation, and it is Rampage. Rampage, the last video game that you probably would think they would adopt into a movie, but they did. Look, I've seen this movie a couple of times, and quite honestly, I can't remember anything from it. And it's weird. That has never happened. I mean, I've watched it 2, maybe 3 times, and I cannot recall one scene from this movie. That's how nothing this movie is. It just did not do anything for me. In 2019, this is where things started to pick up for video game adaptations. Movies actually started to hold some quality. Movies actually were good. Movies you could actually sit down and watch and enjoy. And it started with a little film called Pokemon Detective Pikachu. I was not expecting this movie to be that good. It was really, really good. Um, Not a big Pokemon guy, to be completely fair. So I wasn't expecting much from it, but to have Ryan Reynolds as the voice of Pikachu, hey, sign me up. So I checked it out, and I had some fun with it. I'm like, man, this is good. This is really, really good. I enjoyed that. And so I can honestly say this is probably one of the best video game adaptations at this up to this point. The best video game adaptations they ever made. And it's funny, it's coming from Pokemon. you know? So let's see if we can get a streak going on. In 2020, they had a release of a film that I thought was going to end that little one movie streak, and that was Sonic the Hedgehog. I honestly thought that this was going to be a dumpster fire of a movie. I was not looking forward to it at all. And this was right before the pandemic. It came out in February of 2020, right before all the shutdown stuff. And this is one of the last movies, if not the last movie, I saw before everything shut down. Man, shocked. I'm like, man, this is a good movie. I mean, we're 2 for 2 at this point. I'm like, man, this is a real good movie. And so I'm feeling high. I'm high as a bird, high as a kite. And then we get to December of 2020 with Monster Hunter. And this is from the same team that brought you the Resident Evil movies. So you pretty much know where this is going. I watched this movie, and I couldn't believe how bad it was. Look, I don't know anything about the Monster Hunter video game, but this movie was bad. This movie was so bad. It had no plot whatsoever. It had all the special effects you can ask for, but that didn't save it. That did not save it. It was bad. All right. April 2021, just a couple of years ago, we get a remake of sorts. We get a new, or a reboot, should I say, of a franchise, of a video game that I'm a huge fan of, as I mentioned earlier. I loved the first film back in, what was it, 95? And I look back on it now, and it's cheesy, it's dated, special effects are dated and everything else. But it's one of those guilty pleasures that I loved from my childhood. So they're redoing it now. It's rated R. They're doing the game the way it's supposed to, the movie in the way that the game depicts it. And it is none other than Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat, this movie that came out, was, I think I mentioned it earlier, how they changed a lot of things, how they created characters for the movie, which just doesn't make sense to me. But it was just silly. But as far as the fighting and the special effects and the characters in this movie, spot on perfect. I enjoyed it for what it was. And we're talking on the level of video game movies. You got to grade it like that. You can't grade it on the level of The Godfather. You got to grade it on the level of what we've gotten in video game films. And I just listed all of these to you. And so, yeah, in that regard, Mortal Kombat in 2021 was amazing. So I would say this was one of the good ones. Later that year, we got another film, which I knew nothing about, and it was called Werewolves Within. I never played the game, don't know what it's all about. I did see the movie. It was kind of funny, it's a comedy, but I really don't know how to judge that movie. All right. Also in 2021, we got kind of a reboot yet again for the Resident Evil franchise, and this time around, it's Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City. And just like the other Resident Evil films, this was horrible. This was a bad movie. I mean, boring. It was just nothing about this movie that's appealing. As far as a Resident Evil fan, it's nothing. It's how you digress or regress, should I say? This is bad, bad movie. Now this is where I start to cry internally, because this was the one movie based on a video game that I was looking forward to more than any other, and it is none other than Uncharted. If you listen to this show for any length of time, you know that this was my favorite, is my favorite video game of all time. Uncharted 2, 3, 4, even the little extra game that they have in it, I love them all. And so when we got this movie, of course, I was just ecstatic. I like Tom Holland. I like Mark Wahlberg. But this movie didn't work for me. And it hurts my soul, 'cause I've seen it a couple of times. It's watchable. It's not an unwatchable movie. But it's not Uncharted. Not the Uncharted that I love. Now, they have said they are making more. Hopefully they can actually stick to the games. I mean, you have 4 games to research. You put little pieces of every other game. They bounced all around and put a scene from this game, a scene from that game, a board from this, a level from this game, and put them in one movie. No, just follow the games. And I don't know. It just it's very disappointing. Very, very disappointing. Later on that year, we got the sequel to Sonic the Hedgehog, aptly titled Sonic the Hedgehog 2. And wouldn't you know, I haven't seen Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I completely forgot about Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I heard it was good, but it didn't pop back in my mind until I was doing the research for this show. It's like, oh my God, I forgot about this movie. I forgot all about this movie. And I got to go back and watch it. But I did hear it was good. So I'm excited for that. So that's the list of 30 years of, about to say comic book movies, of video game adaptation. Like I said, there's more misses than hits, but hopefully we'll get back on track. Like I said, we've gotten some good adaptations as of late. Now, I didn't mention The Last of Us because that's not a film, that's a TV show. So that was a good adaptation. I like Dungeons and Dragons, even though that's not a video game per se, but it is a game. And so they're getting there, you know. It's just taking a minute. And hopefully that the Super Mario Brothers movie does great. You know, it looks amazing, so I'm excited for it. But speaking of the Super Mario Brothers movie, let's go back 30 years. Let's go back to the year 1993, and let's review the first full-length live-action film based on a video game. And it is, of course, Super Mario Brothers, which is universally panned for being the worst movie of all time. This is one of the worst movies of all time. In this film, you have Bob Hopkins as Mario. Yes, that's his name. Mario. You have John Leguizamo as Luigi Mario. You have Dennis Hopper as King Koopa. You have Samantha Mathis as Princess Daisy. This movie was just ridiculous. This movie was so ridiculous. If you weren't, look, there are many video games that you could have adapted at that time. You had Contra, you know, Do a Contra movie. Hey, do a Donkey Kong movie. There was no reason to make this movie in the style that they made this movie. This movie wasn't even fit for kids. Now, it wasn't even aimed for kids. It wasn't aimed for adults. I don't know who the target audience for this movie was. This is this movie is so silly that Bob Hopkins didn't promote it. He didn't even want to talk about this movie. It was like, God rest his soul, he's passed away. But it is that bad of a movie. Nothing is more telling. Due to the fact that Mario and Luigi are Italian plumbers from Brooklyn. Bob Hopkins is English. John Leguizamo is Hispanic. Where do we get Italian from these dudes? You want to talk about miscasting? My God. This was so bad. Dennis Hopper as King Koopa. I mean, the sets were horrible. The special effects was horrible. The story was horrible. I mean, nothing worked. Nothing worked in this movie. Nothing was consistent with the video game. And I know the video game is this little plumber running around, bumping his head on bricks and eating mushrooms and growing. I know all that. But it was, you had them with, like, what you call them, rocket boots or something on and all. It just makes no sense. This movie made zero sense. I mean, you either had to be drunk, loaded, or both to sit down and really follow this movie from beginning to end and get a cohesive story out of it. Did not enjoy it. Still one of the worst movie going experiences I've ever had. I remember I went to go see this movie on accident, and because I did not want to go see it because it looked bad from the trailers. But I bought the tickets, right? And I'll never forget this. I'll never forget this. Me and my cousin, we were trying to go sneak and go see Cliffhanger, the Sylvester Stallone film, but it was rated R, and we were under 17, of course. So we bought tickets to Super Mario Brothers, and so we bought the tickets for Super Mario Brothers to go sneak in to go see Cliffhanger. Well, we got caught. And so I said, well, we bought the tickets. And so we might as well go watch Super Mario Brothers. And so it was a double whammy for me. It was I didn't go see the movie that I wanted to see. And I ended up seeing a movie that I utterly hated. I'm glad that it took 30 years, but we're getting a new version of it that's more accurate to the game, that looks more exciting of a film. It's not live action, but my goodness, people, this is just bad. This was just a bad movie. And I know it was 1993. I know special effects was limited. I know all that. But maybe, just maybe, you just should have left it alone. Super Mario Brothers from 1993 gets a letter grade of an F. It was just a horrible, horrible movie. But hey, the good thing about it, you still have the games. As bad as the movie is, as bad as all those video game adaptation films are, you still have the video games. You can still go back and play the games and play them in the way that you love. You know what I'm saying? The versions that you love. You don't have to get stuck with all these just horrible adaptations, man. This is just, man, I can't believe that I actually sat down and watched this in a theater. It still blows my mind, all because I was trying to be sneaky and go see Cliffhanger. So I blame Sylvester Stallone for this debacle that took place in 1993. But anywho's, everybody, are you looking forward to the Super Mario Brothers movie? I am, man. I can't wait. Actually, by the time you're listening to this, I'm pretty sure I've seen it by now. So uh I'm pretty sure I'm gonna like it too. I'm speak that into existence. Let me know. I want to know if you're excited for this film or not. Or you a big video game person or not. Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also look me up on Twitter at the KB Radio Network. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show with all your friends and family. Don't forget, over on YouTube, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Please, ma'am, please, sir. Everybody, thank you for joining me for this extended edition. I wasn't expecting to talk for over an hour about video game movies, but hey, it was over 40 films that we touched on. But everybody, thank you once again for joining me. I want you all to know that I love you. Continue to love one another. And until we speak again, you all be blessed.